Hey guys, I wanted to start out with this one talking to you about the early versus late turn-in. And so pay attention to the ticker on the top right, how much time I am to where I should be on this practice program. This is a very late turn, but look how early I am back to the gas. Now I was into negative deltas. You have to go back and watch this again a couple of times, but I turned very late. I lost a couple of attempts. And I'm going to use this little building right here. And as I got to that building, I was back to the green 6/10. And what that late turn allowed me to do was get the car straighter sooner, although I lost time on entry. So this time I'm going to turn earlier. Notice where I'm at on the green. I'm going to get down almost into the negative, so I didn't lose nearly as much time entering the turn, but I'm not gaining that time back nearly as fast going down the straightaway. And as I get to this building, I'm at roughly the same 6/7. All right. So that's to tell you what early and late turning is all about, basically. And I would advocate for the later turn in that particular one. So here we go. We're going to go to about that pole in the 100. We're going to turn nice and late here. Sometimes we get away with a lot of excess here. Do a lift at the bottom of this hill if necessary, and just you want to be wide open throttle around these two bends without abusing limits. I would not use the curbs there. Go to the red and white curb, brake, brake, brake. Use a lot of this curb, not as much of that curb. We're going to go out to the wide. Brake at the between the white line and the access road. Turn off the access road. Bring it in. You should not use any of the curbs on that hairpin. If you're using the inside curb, you're turning too early or going too slow. All right, long straightaway. We're going to go, I'm going to count to one, not 1/1000, just count to one in the red and white curb. One, brake, 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 brake. Stay out straight, get to about the caution box, turn in, middle of the track, no or minimal curbs, get the car nice and straight. The car loves to snap around on you going over that crest right there. Now we got another long straightaway. I'm going to put two tires on the red and white curb up ahead, and I'm going to brake at about 110. Two tires on the curb. Turn just over that white line. I don't use too much of those curbs. You can use more, but it upsets the car. Turn just after the corner worker station. That curb, as you can see, it tried to jack the car up, so be careful with it. Wide open throttle. We're going to stay about the middle of the track. Brake just before we get straight. Brake, brake, brake. Get in. Little curb. Don't go over. And this is just a lot of half to 2/3 throttle. And you do want to be on that blue excess like that. Get to the 50, brake, turn at about the same time. And if you use this curb, great. Brake and turn with the red and white curb coming around that last turn. And there you go. That's the lap. Now let's.
So as we go into turn one at Abu Dhabi, this is the only place I know of that has, and even the only corner on this track that has these orange distance markers. And for a long time, I didn't even notice they had numbers on them, honestly. So you want to go to about the 100, and there's also some sort of radio antenna or something right there that's also handy to use as you go into this corner as a brake mark. This is one of the easiest corners in the game to me to turn early to, though. So I'll show you on the next one where you want to turn. You want to turn at about that box or about this 50 marker. Those are two good markers to use. And see, it looks like the corner is going to be a lot more open than it actually is. And it's really easy to end up on the excess pavement here. So even though I turned a little before the box, initiated my turn in a little bit before that caution box, and you see even so, I'm still almost out of track limits here. And I could have turned a little later, honestly. Now, I am driving on strict track limits, I promise, but it has consistently given me this. So the track limits thing, though, sometimes it seems to pick up on if you're gaining an advantage. So maybe if I was doing this faster, it would have got me. I don't know. But it consistently gave it to me, and I pretty consistently take it. So just throw it out there. Now, if you do stay out here all the way to that bridge, it does call it. You do need to pull the car back onto the track before the end of that red and white. I would leave two tires on the blue up the hill just a little bit until you turn in, going under this. It's not really a bridge, but it's an overhang of some sort. This is a section that I run enough downforce that I'm able to run this wide open throttle. If you are not running enough downforce and you need to lift, like going over the hill, it's a long way from here, but there is a spot going around this corner that you may need to lift. And if you find yourself needing to do that, do the lift back here instead. And that way, once you go to wide open throttle around this left-hander, your next lift is a couple of slides from now. Now, as you go around this left-hand bend, don't let the car go more than about the middle of the way across the track. And then as you start coming into that red and white curb, you turn in. I would not put tires over the curb. I might touch the curb, but it seems like once you get tires on the curb, it starts unbalancing the car and wants to pull you in. A common theme to this track. The curbs here are pretty aggressive, honestly. So we'll end up middle of the track, edge of the track even. We need to pull it back in. We need to brake right at that red and white curb right there. Um, Not the 100. The 100 is a touch early. So we're going to go to the curb. And we're going to start our turn in just before this alternate track access road brings us back on. And even though this curb is very aggressive and likes to really unsettle the car, use it. I've actually put 4 tires on this curb on strict track limits, and it let me have it. I think basically as long as you don't take out this pylon, you're okay. And there again, that's just been my experience. This is not necessarily my best track, so take that with a grain of salt. I do think it's worth it to pop that curb and unbalance the car, because I do think having the car further left and not having to do as much turning to get the car left to make that right is worth it. Don't be too aggressive with this right-hand curve. It will spin you out, upset the balance on your car. So you can come over here and just touch it carefully. You'll come out to the curb, aiming back to the right, and there's a couple of things here that I want to talk about. I already went over the early versus late turns here. So you could come to say, I start my braking between this white DRS line and the end of that red curb right there. That's my brake part. And then I turn about halfway or so down this this alternate course road, access road, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I can use this as well. So I drive straight and I start my turn, and that corner just about goes out of view. And we're going to turn very sharp. This is one of the sharpest turns in the game. Notice I've got full opposite lock in the wheel, and I've brought it to the curb. Now, if you're getting on that curb, it's because you turned too early or you're going too slow or something like that. If you're on that curb at one, it just upsets the balance of the car, and then you have to catch the car right before you go down one of the longest straightaways in the game, and you don't want to do that. There's no real benefit to going over this curb, in my opinion, even if you're on regular track limits, and getting on this curb just screws the car up. It seems like the curbs here do a pretty decent job of telling you to stay on the track. If you find yourself out there too much, again, are you turning too early? Or, in this case, are you straightening up the wheel too early? I mean, you've really just got to keep the wheel in the car for a long time going around that hairpin. So the straightaway has a little bit of a weird offset to it at a spot. You'll notice down on your own. Just kind of get to the middle of the straightaway, and then the middle of the straightaway becomes the end of the straightaway, or the edge of the straightaway, rather. I brake. I don't count 1/1000. I just count one brake as I come into the red and white curbs, and it is before that yellow 100 marker, I think it is. This is probably a little bit of a turn early. You might be able to drive towards that caution box longer. I think I will actually put that on my track map for my personal notes to do in the future myself. But I always had a hard time finding a marker of when to turn here. And so you don't want to use any curbs really, or not a lot of curbs going around this left-right complex. Get to it, but don't climb up on it. It just jacks the car up, and it seems like it's just really hard to gather it up, or it'll throw you off course or something like that. So try not to use them. And once you get to about half throttle, maybe a third throttle or so, don't add any throttle until you're straight on the straightaway. This is right before I cut to the right. It's just kind of a rhythm and a flow. Turn left, get it partway up the hill, cut right. You might be able to use that blue to red and white index over here, but I don't personally. This is on the curb. It's a little aggressive, but it's working. Now, what you do have to watch out for is this is one of the easiest turns to get spun out on. What's happening is the car goes kind of flattens out on top of the hill. It's like the suspension system wants to kind of like keep going uphill, and it does want to spin the car out. I actually run a understeery setup just for this corner alone, just so I can be more comfortable getting back to the throttle and launching it down the straightaway. And another way you need to circumvent this, no matter what you do at the setup, is get the wheel straight as soon as you can. All right. Any further, and this is another one of them spots that even though there's runoff, it seems like it's just not really worth it to use it. It seems like if you run the corner properly, it ends up being faster. So nice long straightaway again, and this is a spot that when I'm running regular limits versus strict, I do it a lot differently. Notice the curb is tapered, and when you get the right side tires over on that curb, it wants to kind of pull the car onto this alternate course pit lane re-entry road, and then it causes a track limits violations on you. If you're on regular limits, by all means put 4 tires over there. And what I'm going to do on strict limits is kind of a compromise. I'm going to start back here. I brake at about 105 or so, 110. And I kind of drive onto the curbs as I go down. They end at about 50. And by the time I get to 50, I got 2 tires sitting on this curb. I'm going to start my braking, not my braking, Rob. I've been braking. If you're starting your braking here, you're way too late. I'm going to start my turning somewhere around this line and the beginning of that curb, somewhere along or start my turn-in rather, around that area. All right, now here's a spot where you can use the curbs or you cannot. I don't think it makes a difference. I mean, if you hit the curbs, it upsets the balance on the car, and then you're having to wait on the car to settle before you can make your next turn or whatever. So I find it to be kind of a do what makes you happy. Either pop the curbs or stay off the curbs and make the left right. Personally, I prefer to keep the car under control and not bouncing around. So this is actually a spot where I don't use the curbs that much. I mean, I might put 2 tires on here, but I'm not going to be out here necessarily, if that makes sense. Next hill, same thing. You can see this time I got 2 tires on the curb, but I'm definitely not going to go, way out here and bounce off that thing. Kiss the curb. Same thing with the next curb. Kiss the curb. Go over. The track falls away, so if you end up with the tires out here, it's going to really want to pull you into the wall, and it's going to make it really awkward re-entering. There is not a good marker to tell you when to brake and turn ahead. There are a few things, though. For one, I index off that corner worker station. That's my marker. Another marker you might use that honestly I didn't see until I started doing this is that this safer barrier or tire barrier ends, and then it becomes just an unprotected guardrail. You might use that marker. Another thing that I sometimes use is that this green paint on the excess ends, and you can't really tell where. It's somewhere along in there, though, about with that, not quite to that light pole. And so you'll just have to find some marker in here to tell you when to turn in. It will be a decent brake, not a full hard brake, but a pretty decent amount of brake. Notice the green has ended. We're into unprotected guardrail instead of tires protecting barriers now. And I turn just when it feels right. I get a lot of this inside curb, but it upsets the cars. So I would say it's usable, but it's not an essential thing that you use it. The exit curbing, again, is not worth its trouble. For one, you're trying to bring the car back to the left to make these 2 slight right kinks. And, yeah, it will kick the car around and throw you into that grass. I mean, now, if you're on regular limits, what is kind of worth it sometimes, I would say more of an emergency recovery, is if you have to go way out here and then bring the car back in. That seems like it's worth it. But it seems like driving on the curb is just not worth its trouble. So this is around the first right kink. We're going into the second right kink, which is a little tighter. And I would say you want to enter from track middle with a little bit of wheel in the car. And there's several things to index off of. There's a caution light, there's a curb, and then this fence ends, and there's like an opening in the fence right there when you get to it. Index off something in there. You'll brake just before you get onto the little short chute. And it's pretty much impossible to be really fast and parallel. So you're going to have to just make a nice run down here. And I don't really have a good turn marker to give you other than you have to figure out when it feels right. You might be able to use the end of that wall to index off of, honestly, but I don't. I just turn when it feels right. And so you can use this curb, and once you release the brake in this corner, you're not going to use a lot of brake again until you're around these 2 left-hand bends and coming into this section, honestly. And so we want a turn-in marker that allows us to use a little bit of this curb and yet not go over that curb. And if you own this excess, it's just not worth it. I mean, you need to be kind of to the right half of the track anyway. And I would say you're not going to drive all the way to them just yet, but there is a corner worker station and a caution light box right there. And you want to aim to drive towards that caution light box, in my opinion. Although we're not going to drive all the way to it, but we're going to aim at it. We're going to start our turn right as the red and white curb picks up. And here you can see that corner worker station again. The curb has just started to end, and that's how we're going to know it's time to turn. We might use a light brake and then lightly back to the gas. We're going to get on that curb on the left, and then this is coming out from under that bridge. And I don't know, it's a bridge, it's a hotel, I don't know, but I guess it's like a little pedestrian bridge that connects this hotel to the infield of the track. But about halfway under it is where I start my brake, and then I start my turn just as I come out from under it. Not essential to be on the curb. The curb will kind of jack around with your car a little bit, but it's usable. And we're going to aim to get on that curb. And this is where there's so many corners. It's just so hard to nail them all in one single lap, honestly. Um, when you come off of that corner, there is this blue excess, and I think it's worth it to get out there and put 2 tires on it. This is a few laps earlier. I was chasing down Hamilton and Verstappen. They both pitted, which is why I've been leading most of this particular lap. Um, I think if you're not out here, honestly, you're either not opening up your wheel and getting on the gas, or you're just not going fast enough around the corner. I mean, the car should carry its way out here on its own, and you have to stay on the blue for a moment in order to get it right. So we're going into the last corner complex finally. So I'm going to say you're going to brake just at the 50, maybe just before the 50. You can see this is I'm coming off the gas and onto the brake now. And then you're going to turn a moment after the 50. And honestly, if you wait for the caution light, like that's probably too far. It's just after 50. It's just brush bend. And the understeery nature of my car's setup allows me to just barely make it, honestly, if I turn that early. Getting on a lot of curb through this section is great. You can use this curb on this particular lap. I wasn't out there, but you can put 2 tires on this curb. And if you do put 2 tires on this curb, leave them there. Now, there is a little bit of a rise. This area out here is risen up, and you can see that little rise right there. So it doesn't really stop the car like it probably should in real life. But if you do end up out there, just leave it out there. All right. And as you can see, I brought the car over a little bit. I try to maintain a straight trajectory down there wherever I end up. And you brake right at the red and white curb again. And this time, this is a rather unique corner with a unique reference point. There's the short course reentry is coming on, and we have a curb that kind of wraps into the curb. Now, just before we get to that curb, and we're going to kind of turn almost like we're trying to go parallel with it. And if we turn sharp enough, it should put us, turning sharp enough right at that point, it should put us aimed at this curb. And that's perfect. We can use a little bit of this curb, and we can use a lot of exit curb. And if you have to, there is some runoff out here on strict track limits. If I messed it up, it seems like it lets me get away with it, but it's just not really worth it time-wise to go out there. It seems like, though, if you're doing it on purpose, trying to gain time, it catches you and gets you. It's very strange how it works for me anyway. And that's a lap around Abu Dhabi, guys. Hope this helped you out. And that's a season as well. Thank you for watching, guys.